The dealer watched Sarah Chen load vintage tractor parts into her beaten Ford pickup that April morning in 2011, and he knew exactly how this would end. He'd seen it before. The stubborn posture, the refusal to listen, the quiet determination of someone about to lose everything they owned. "You're throwing good money after bad," he said, not unkindly. The Farmall H she just bought parts for was 65 years old. Parts were scarce. Fuel efficiency was terrible. No cab, no power steering, nothing. Sarah kept loading without turning around. "I know what I'm doing." The dealer shook his head. 23 years selling equipment had taught him to recognize doomed ventures. Most small operators who clung to old iron were gone now. Their land sold to corporate operations running GPS-guided combines worth more than suburban houses. "You're setting yourself up to fail," he told her flat out. "That 40 acres you just bought, you'll need reliable equipment to make it work." Sarah finally looked at him. She was 34, 5'3", with calluses the dealer wasn't interested in understanding. "I'll manage," she said, and drove away. Here's what the dealer didn't understand about failure. It has multiple definitions. His version meant not keeping up with neighbors, not maximizing acreage, not running equipment that could plant 600 acres in a week. Sarah's version meant something different entirely. It meant going broke trying to service debt on machinery that cost more than her house. Her brother-in-law farmed 640 acres of corn and soybeans with $250,000 worth of John Deere equipment, and he'd been even less diplomatic than the dealer. "You're crazy," he told her at Thanksgiving 3 months earlier. "You can't farm commercially with museum pieces." Her father, who'd sold their family farm in Iowa back in 1997, urged her to invest in something sensible, meaning anything but agriculture. Even her husband Mark, an engineer who knew better than to question her agricultural decisions, had raised his eyebrows when she spent $3,200 on a tractor that had been sitting in a barn since 1989. Its red paint faded to pink, its steel wheels half buried in mouse nests, and 22 years of accumulated dust. The 40 acres sat in Wisconsin hill country, terrain the big operators had bypassed because it was too rough, too varied, too small for industrial-scale farming. The previous owner had let it go for a decade after his wife died. Brambles everywhere. Barn missing half its roof. The century-old farmhouse leaned southeast with broken windows and a settled foundation. The well pump was seized. No three-phase power. The access road was 2 rutted tracks that turned to soup every spring. The dealer had driven past once and understood immediately why Sarah got it for $128,000. About a third of what equivalent acreage was going for in flat country. "Location, location, location," he'd muttered, and wrote her off as another romantic who'd be selling at a loss within 5 years. But Sarah had grown up learning different lessons. Her grandfather had been a tenant farmer in California's Central Valley during the 50s and 60s, working other people's land with whatever equipment he could keep running. He taught her to see value where others saw junk, to understand that reliability wasn't about newness, but about simplicity and knowledge. "A machine with 5 moving parts beats a machine with 50 moving parts 9 times out of 10, he used to say. The Farmall H had maybe 30 moving parts total. No computer chips, no hydraulic systems requiring special fluids, no emission controls that failed in ways you couldn't diagnose, just a 4-cylinder engine, a clutch, a transmission, and enough torque to pull stumps out of ground that hadn't been worked in a generation." Sarah spent the winter of 2011 in her rented garage taking that engine apart piece by piece, learning its language. She found a cracked cylinder head, a scored piston, bearings worn to nothing, all of which she'd expected. She also found something the dealer would never have understood: good bones. The casting was solid. The tolerances, even after 65 years, were within spec. This was a machine built in 1946 when Farmall still meant something, when International Harvester was putting out equipment designed to last 40 years of hard use, not to be replaced every 8 years on a dealer financing plan. And here's something most people don't grasp about old farm equipment. The economics aren't just about purchase price versus productivity. They're about total cost of ownership, about what happens when something breaks, about who controls your ability to keep working. Modern tractors run on proprietary software. When they fail, you can't fix them yourself. You call the dealer, who sends a technician with a laptop to run diagnostics you're not allowed to access. You pay whatever they charge. You wait as long as they make you wait. Your crops sit in the field while your debt payments come due. Sarah's grandfather had understood this instinctively in an era before computers made it explicit. Dependence is expensive. Control is valuable. Knowledge is power. By May 2011, Sarah had the Farmall running. Not perfectly. There was a slight knock in the number 3 cylinder she'd address eventually, and the governor needed adjustment. But running well enough to start work. She began with the access road, using a box blade she'd fabricated herself from an old disc harrow frame and some channel iron. The Farmall's low gearing and high ground clearance made it ideal for work that would have bogged down a modern utility tractor. She spent 3 weeks cutting a new path that followed the contour of the land instead of fighting straight through. Her brother-in-law drove past one Saturday afternoon and shook his head at the pace. "You'd have that done in 2 days with proper equipment," he called out. Sarah waved and kept working. She was learning the land, understanding how water moved across it, where soil was deep, where bedrock came close to the surface. You can't learn that at 12 miles per hour. Think about what she was actually doing here. Every minute spent on that tractor was reconnaissance. Every slow pass across that property was education. Modern farming treats land as a factory floor, flat, uniform, predictable. But land isn't uniform. It has personality, high spots and low spots, clay pockets and sandy stretches, areas that hold water and areas that drain fast. Sarah was investing time to save money later, learning things that would inform every decision she made for the next decade. This is the kind of thinking debt doesn't allow. When you've got loan payments coming due, you can't afford to spend 3 weeks learning land. You need to plant now, harvest now, sell now, service debt now. Speed becomes mandatory, which means knowledge becomes optional. The barn came next. Contractors quoted $18,000 to $22,000 for materials and labor to rebuild the roof. Sarah spent $2,400 on reclaimed metal roofing from a demolished dairy operation 40 miles away, and another $800 on treated lumber from a sawmill that dealt in small lots. The Farmall became her crane, her forklift, her scaffolding support. She'd weld up a lifting frame, hook it to the drawbar, and use the tractor's weight and instability to hoist 24-foot panels into position while she worked from a ladder. It took her all of June and half of July, working evenings after her day job as a veterinary technician and all day on weekends. Mark helped when he could, but mostly it was Sarah and that old tractor, working in a rhythm that had nothing to do with efficiency and everything to do with what was possible. By mid-July, the barn had a roof that would last 30 years. Total cost, $3,850, including welding materials. The new Holland dealer would have financed her a skid steer for $42,000 that could have done the heavy lifting faster, but she would have still needed the roofing contractors, and she would have had monthly payments for the next 7 years. Run the math on that. The skid steer saves her maybe 6 weeks of labor. The payment would have been around $550 a month. Over 7 years, that's $46,200, not counting interest, which would push the real cost past $55,000. She'd have paid $55,000 to save 6 weeks of her own time. That only makes sense if your time is worth more than $1,300 per week, and Sarah was making $17 an hour as a vet tech. The skid steer was a terrible deal dressed up as convenience. August brought the first real test. Sarah had cleared 3 acres on the south-facing slope and prepared it for a test crop, a mix of heritage vegetables she planned to sell at farmers markets. She'd borrowed a neighbor's disc to work the soil, but when it came time to plant, she faced a problem modern farmers had solved with $80,000 precision planters: how to get seeds in the ground at the right depth and spacing without equipment designed for 600-acre operations. She solved it the way small farmers had solved it for generations, with attention and time. She fabricated a simple toolbar from salvage pipe, mounted it to the Farmall's drawbar, and attached hand-me-down cultivator shanks at precise intervals. It wasn't fast, it wasn't fancy, but it worked, and it cost her $230 in materials and 3 evenings in her garage. The vegetables came up in August, and by September she was selling at 2 farmers markets, bringing in $1,200 to $1,800 per weekend. The margins were remarkable, 70 to 80%, after accounting for seeds, soil amendments, and fuel. No middleman, no distributor taking cuts, no commodity market setting prices she couldn't control. She was discovering something the agricultural economists had forgotten in their rush toward scale. There's a difference between revenue and profit, between top-line growth and bottom-line survival. Her brother-in-law that fall harvested 950 acres of corn and soybeans. He grossed $218,000, an impressive number by any standard. But his input costs were staggering. Seed, fertilizer, chemicals, fuel, equipment maintenance, crop insurance, and debt service consumed $173,000 of that. He netted $45,000 from 950 acres, working 90-hour weeks during planting and harvest. Sarah netted $19,000 from 3 acres, working around 40 hours weekly. Per acre profitability wasn't even comparable. Her brother-in-law was clearing about $47 per acre. Sarah was clearing $6,300 per acre. When you looked at it that way, the question wasn't whether Sarah's model could work. The question was whether his model made any sense at all. But here's where it gets complicated. Where simple math meets complex reality, her brother-in-law couldn't farm 3 acres profitably. The equipment he owned required massive acreage to justify its existence. He couldn't scale down without abandoning everything he'd built. He was trapped by his own infrastructure, locked into a model that demanded constant expansion to service the debt required to achieve that expansion. It's a treadmill. You can't stop running without falling off. Sarah had chosen a different trap. Or more accurately, she'd chosen freedom with limits. She couldn't scale up without abandoning her model. 3 acres could become 10, maybe 20 with enough help, but she'd never farm 600 acres with vintage tractors and hand-fabricated equipment. She'd chosen a ceiling in exchange for a floor, trading unlimited upside for guaranteed survival. The difference was control. Her brother-in-law's creditors controlled his life. Sarah controlled her own. By 2012, Sarah had added 2 more small parcels through creative arrangements. A 5-acre plot she rented for $300 a year from an elderly neighbor who just wanted someone to keep it clean, and a 7-acre piece she got through a work trade deal with a landowner who wanted her vegetables and didn't need the cash. She was up to 15 acres in production, still working off the original Farmall plus 1 additional 1953 Farmall Super H she'd picked up for $1,900 at another estate auction. The second tractor had cost her a winter's worth of weekends and about $1,100 in parts. But now she had redundancy. When one tractor needed work, the other kept running. This is insurance that doesn't require monthly premiums. Her CSA program launched that spring with 23 member families paying $400 each for weekly vegetable boxes from June through October. That's $9,200 before the season even started. Working capital with no interest charges, no repayment terms, no creditor to answer to. Her members were investors, but the kind of investors who wanted vegetables, not equity. The kind who showed up to help harvest when she was overwhelmed. The kind who brought their kids to the farm and taught those kids where food came from. This was finance that built community instead of servicing bankers. Restaurant contracts came next. Small places, locally owned, run by chefs who valued flavor and story over consistent sizing and year-round availability. By 2013, she had 6 restaurant accounts generating another $18,000 annually. Her farmers' market sales remained strong. The CSA grew to 37 members. She was grossing $68,000, netting $42,000 after all costs, working 1 full-time job as a vet tech and 1 full-time job as a farmer. Mark had started helping more, handling market sales while Sarah worked the fields. The farm was becoming viable. Here's what was actually happening, though. Something invisible in the revenue numbers, but critical to understanding why this worked. Sarah was building knowledge capital. Every season taught her what varieties grew well in her specific soil, which pests showed up when, which cultivation techniques worked in her particular terrain, which customers valued what products. This knowledge was cumulative. It compounded. A corporate operation could buy the farm next door, but they couldn't buy what Sarah knew about making those specific 40 acres produce. Her advantage wasn't scale or technology, it was intimacy with place. By 2014, a local food hub approached her about supplying produce to their wholesale network. The volumes they wanted were beyond what she could grow, but they introduced her to 3 other small farmers working similar models. Sarah organized them into an informal cooperative. They'd coordinate plantings, share equipment, pool resources for bulk purchases of seeds and amendments. None of them gave up independence, but all of them gained efficiency. When Sarah's hand seeder broke mid-season, she borrowed one from a cooperative member. When another farmer got behind on harvesting, 3 of them showed up on a Saturday and helped. This was the kind of mutual aid that used to be standard in rural America before farming became an extractive industry. Her brother-in-law lost his farm in 2015, not because he was incompetent. He was skilled, hardworking, knowledgeable about agronomics and market timing. He lost it because 2 bad years in a row, a spring that was too wet followed by a summer that was too dry, meant he couldn't service debt. The bank didn't care about his skill. They cared about payments. When payments stopped, they took the land. He sold the equipment at auction for 50 cents on the dollar and moved to town to work in a grain elevator. The dealer who'd financed him that equipment never sent condolences. They were already working the next customer. Sarah heard about it through family channels, and it shook her more than she wanted to admit. Not because she'd predicted it, she hadn't, not specifically, but because it confirmed everything her grandfather had taught her about dependence and debt. Her brother-in-law had done everything conventional wisdom said to do. He'd modernized, he'd scaled up, he'd followed expert advice, and the system had destroyed him anyway. The game was rigged, not through conspiracy, but through structure. The equipment dealers needed customers in debt. The banks needed borrowers. The input suppliers needed buyers. Everyone in the supply chain extracted value from farmers who were just trying to grow food. The only way to win was not to play. By 2016, Sarah had acquired a 3rd vintage Farmall, a 1948 Model M for $2,800. She was now running 3 tractors ranging from 68 to 70 years old across 22 acres in active production. Her CSA had grown to 56 members. Restaurant accounts numbered 8. The food hub was taking everything else she could produce. Gross revenue hit $112,000. Net income was $67,000. She'd quit the vet tech job. Mark had reduced his engineering hours to 3 days a week to work the farm full-time. They were making it. The dealer's successor, the original, had retired, saw her at the farm supply store that summer. "I've heard about you," he said. "The lady with the museum tractors who shouldn't have succeeded." Sarah smiled. "They told me I was crazy. They weren't wrong to be skeptical, but they were asking the wrong questions." Think about that phrasing. They weren't wrong to be skeptical. Sarah was giving him credit, acknowledging that from his perspective, her plan looked insane, but they were asking the wrong questions. He'd asked, "Can old equipment do modern work?" She'd asked, "What kind of work needs doing, and what kind of equipment makes sense for doing it?" Different questions, different answers. This is the core insight that separates people who build sustainable operations from people who chase scale. The right question isn't, "What's the best tool?" The right question is, "What's the best tool for this specific job, given these specific constraints, with these specific resources?" By 2018, something interesting happened. Young farmers started showing up at her gate, asking questions. They'd heard about her through social media, through the cooperative, through restaurant chefs, through that mysterious network by which unconventional success gets noticed. They wanted to know how she'd done it, what she'd learned, whether her model could be replicated. Sarah started hosting quarterly workshops, charging $150 for a full day of education. She'd cover equipment basics, soil management, direct marketing, CSA logistics, financial planning, everything she'd figured out through trial and error. 60 people showed up to the first workshop. The workshop revenue was $9,000. Found money, essentially, since she was sharing knowledge that cost her nothing to transmit. 2 of those workshop attendees came back and asked if they could apprentice. Sarah didn't want employees. Payroll created the kind of overhead that destroyed flexibility. But apprentices were different. They'd work for knowledge and a share of production. They'd learn her model while helping her scale up. By 2019, she had 2 full-time apprentices working her land, plus Mark handling markets and the business side. Acreage and production hit 26. CSA membership reached 73. Restaurant accounts numbered 10. Gross revenue was $158,000. Net income after paying the apprentices and all other costs was $82,000. The workshops became a regular thing. She hosted them 4 times a year, started charging $200 as demand increased, capped attendance at 40, because more than that destroyed the intimacy that made them valuable. That added another $32,000 in revenue annually for maybe 60 days of total work across the year. She was monetizing knowledge, the thing corporate agriculture had tried to make proprietary through patents and software and proprietary genetics. Sarah's knowledge was open source by default, freely shared, and ironically more valuable because it wasn't locked down. Here's what most people miss about teaching. It's not charity. When Sarah taught someone how to start a CSA or maintain a vintage tractor or direct market vegetables, she was creating future cooperative members, future equipment buyers who'd keep the used market liquid, future advocates who'd defend small-scale agriculture in policy discussions. She was building an ecosystem that supported her model. This is what economists call positive externalities, benefits that accrue to you from other people's success. Corporate agriculture creates negative externalities, pollution, soil depletion, community destruction, then lobbies for subsidies to offset the damage. Sarah was creating a different kind of economy entirely. By 2021, COVID had reordered food systems in ways that benefited small-scale local producers. Restaurant accounts temporarily disappeared as dining rooms closed, but CSA demand exploded. People wanted reliable food sources close to home. People wanted to know their farmer. Sarah's CSA membership hit 85 families, with a wait list of 37 more she couldn't accommodate. She raised prices from $400 to $550 per season, still below market value for the quantity of food provided, but sustainable for her cost structure. Gross revenue that year hit $172,000. Net income was $91,000. She'd reached something like equilibrium. She couldn't grow much larger without fundamentally changing the model, hiring real employees, buying modern equipment, sacrificing the knowledge intensity and attention to detail that made her produce valuable. She could maintain 28 to 30 acres indefinitely, grossing $180,000 to $200,000, netting $85,000 to $95,000, working reasonable hours, owning everything free and clear. This was the ceiling she'd accepted when she chose her path, and it turned out to be plenty. By 2023, 12 years after that conversation at the dealership, Sarah's 3 vintage Farmalls had a combined age of 222 years. They were still running, still reliable, still proving that appropriate technology beats expensive technology when you ask the right questions. Her gross revenue that year exceeded $186,000. Net income was $94,000. She employed 3 people part-time during peak season, 2 aspiring farmers learning the model, 1 general laborer who needed the work. She fed 89 families directly through the CSA. She supplied 11 restaurants. She taught workshops on low-capital farming that other farmers paid to attend. In October 2023, she received an invitation to keynote the Midwest Organic Farming Conference. The audience would include 1,200 farmers, researchers, and agricultural professionals. The topic, resilient farm models in an era of consolidation. She accepted and spent November preparing a presentation that wasn't about vintage tractors at all. The tractors were just tools. The real story was about questioning assumptions, about understanding that appropriate technology isn't determined by newness, but by fit, about building businesses on knowledge and equity instead of debt and depreciation. She talked about her grandfather's wisdom, about the dealer who'd been wrong for the right reasons, about her brother-in-law who'd done everything conventional wisdom said to do and lost everything anyway. The presentation included numbers. She showed that her $38,000 in total equipment investment had supported 12 years of profitable farming, while equivalent modern equipment, even used, would have required $180,000 minimum, with ongoing payments that would have consumed 40 to 60% of gross revenue. She demonstrated that her maintenance costs averaged $2,340 per year for 3 tractors versus the $8,700 her brother-in-law had averaged for 2 modern tractors before losing the farm. She explained that her operations' resilience came from simplicity, mechanical systems she could repair herself, parts that were available and affordable, knowledge that transferred across equipment because the fundamentals didn't change. The audience wasn't just attentive. They were hungry for this information, desperate for a model that didn't require betting their future on dealer financing and commodity markets they couldn't control. During the Q&A, a young farmer asked the question Sarah had been waiting for. But what about efficiency? Don't modern tractors let you farm more land in less time? Sarah nodded. Absolutely. My brother-in-law could plant his 640 acres in about a week. Took me 5 weeks to plant my 28 acres. But here's what matters. He netted $31,000 in his best year before losing the farm. I'm netting $94,000 this year, and I own everything free and clear. Efficiency is only valuable if it translates to profitability. Speed has a cost, and that cost includes complexity, dependence, and debt. I chose a different path. The standing ovation lasted 3 minutes. Afterward, 73 people gave her contact information wanting to learn more. 5 agricultural nonprofits asked about partnering on educational programming. A documentary filmmaker wanted to tell her story. Sarah agreed to some, declined most, and drove home thinking about her grandfather, about appropriate technology, about the quiet satisfaction of being right in ways that took a decade to prove. Today, Sarah Chen farms 28 acres in southwest Wisconsin with 3 vintage Farmall tractors whose combined age exceeds 2 centuries. She employs 3 people. She feeds 89 families directly. She supplies 11 restaurants. She teaches workshops on low-capital farming. Her gross revenue exceeds $185,000 annually with net income over $90,000. She owns everything: land, equipment, infrastructure, free and clear. The new Holland dealer's prediction of failure never materialized. The museum pieces he dismissed are still working, still reliable, still proving that you can win by refusing to play the game everyone else is losing. The question Sarah gets asked most often isn't about the tractors. It's about the philosophy. How did you know it would work? How did you have the confidence to go against every expert's advice? Her answer is always the same. I didn't know. I just knew the other way wasn't working for most people, and I was willing to try something different. My grandfather taught me to see value where others saw junk, to trust simplicity over complexity, to build equity instead of debt. The tractors were just the tool. The real work was changing how I thought about what success looked like. 12 years, 3 vintage tractors, 28 acres, 0 debt. One woman who listened to a dealer tell her she was crazy and built a farm anyway. The numbers don't lie. Appropriate technology won. And somewhere, maybe another small farmer is looking at old equipment and asking different questions, wondering if there might be another way. There is. Sarah proved it. The museum pieces work just fine if you're asking the right questions.